morning, and to our friends joining us abroad, good evening. I am your host, Christy Idlekeeper. Welcome to Mirage Talks. If you're like me, you love a good story. Today, we bring to you an expert storyteller. He is also the Chief Marketing Officer and entrepreneur to touch on the topic, 3 lessons from Israel about marketing, and answer the question, why sea pandas don't exist. Eliav Rodman. Eliav, welcome. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Let's get started.
Okay, so we are going to answer those questions. I've got a few stories to share today, and I'll start by sharing my screen because it's going to be easier to do that with a bit of a presentation here. Okay, so first of all, thanks to the Mirage team for having me here today. And I want to start with a question. Live audience can feel free to answer in the chat. What is this animal? Who can tell me? There's a spoiler in the session title, of course, but that was the trade-off for enticing you here with the catchy title. So go ahead, throw out any ideas. Is it an orca? I'd like to. Is it an orca, or perhaps? Okay, so right, so killer whale. Okay, so killer whale is typically what we would call this, and why? Because if you look at it, right, it could really be a sea panda. And so basically, who was the marketing genius that called them killer whales instead of sea pandas? And let me take you down that route for another second here. Do you want to take your nephew to SeaWorld to pet a sea panda for like $5? Or maybe we're going to do like an extreme sport version where we're going to put you in a cage in the ocean with a killer whale. That's going to cost at least, I don't know, at least $500, maybe $5,000, who knows? And what's the difference between those two? The cute little sea panda and the killer whale? Just marketing, same animal. And that's what marketing is right there. So I'm going to ask you another question. And live audience, feel free to answer in the chat as well. What is marketing anyway? Like, what is this marketing thing all about? So if you ask me, this is marketing. Marketing is a lens. What does a lens do? A lens focuses. Like we can see here in front of us on the image, there's a little itty bit in focus right in the center, and everything else around it, blurry, right? Boom, that's marketing. Why? Because it's bringing some small detail into focus just for a moment, that like aha moment, and just get you to pay attention to that little detail that I want you to pay attention to. And now we can have a conversation. And that's what I love about marketing. It allows us, right? The concept, the idea of marketing in general is to grab someone's attention for just a moment, to get them to focus in on that one thing that they might not have otherwise noticed, right? And walking around on the street, sitting at home on our computer, holding our phones in our hands, right? We're bombarded with messages all the time. In this day and age, we're overloaded, really. But when someone manages to do that to us for 1 second, just focus on that one thing, boom, I love it. That's marketing. So in the next few minutes that we're going to spend together, I'm going to tell you 3 stories, like I promised, true to my word. And each of the 3 stories has a message. And each connects with marketing. And each also connects with Israel. So here we go. But first, who am I and why should you listen to me? So let me introduce myself a little bit more. So nice to meet you again. I'm Eliav. And my friends will tell you that I've been a marketeer since I was a little kid. Always telling stories, spinning an angle, selling them something. I used to sell, I grew up in Israel. I used to sell crembo out of my locker in high school to my friends for a small profit to fund my own Krembo habit, always working an angle. I grew up part in Israel, part in the US. I repeated that pattern as an adult. I went back to the US for a couple of years and then back to Israel again. And my whole life, I've always been bridging cultures, connecting between people, kind of being that mediator, translator person. And I'd like to think at least always striving to do good. So that's what I put on the tagline, bridging cultures and doing good. So in the past decade plus, I've also spent time in a series of startups, mostly building marketing infrastructure and marketing teams. I started off in some companies like Orcam or My Interview, and in the last 2.5 years, I've become an as a service, and basically working with a series of startups to create marketing infrastructure for them. But my biggest project really is the kids. That's what that looks like. Typical dad trying to juggle the kids and work at the same time. The picture's a few years dated. They're a bit older than that now, but yeah, now that the little one's 5, she won't go under the lap desk like that anymore. So anyways, that's definitely the biggest project. And thanks to my amazing wife also, who is also a marketeer and always there to support me, and definitely played a part in putting together the stories and the presentation that you guys are hearing today. Okay, enough about me. On to the stories. So the first story I want to tell you has to do with challenging norms, and this kind of emphasizes the importance of questioning conventional wisdom and finding innovative solutions. And in Israel, the entrepreneurial spirit often involves defying traditional boundaries, thinking outside the box, right? For marketers like me, this means being bold, taking some risks, and developing unique strategies to set yourself apart from competitors. So this is a story about when I joined Orcam, when we had a fairly, to say the least, untested product in the early days, startup style, and we went out to meet the audience. And one of the reasons we wanted to do that was to get some firsthand contact and understand our users really well. That's really, really important when you're trying to craft kind of marketing ideas, marketing strategy, is to understand your users as best you can. So, we created a beta test. And I actually went to New York. I sat in these actual people's homes. They were our early adopters, beta testers, to understand how they use the product. The product here that Orcam has is a smart camera that goes on your glasses and helps people who are blind or visually impaired to be able to read text and identify objects and products and money and all sorts of other things. It sits on the glasses and speaks to the user in their ear. So guess what? I got some interesting feedback. And then I went home and discovered that there's a huge difference between the speed of beta testing with my American beta testers and my Israeli beta testers. Because an American beta tester speaks to you like this. Well, it would be nice if maybe next time you could add a certain feature. And the Israeli beta tester's like, dude, why doesn't it do this? Like, oh, you wanted it to do this? You're like, yes, I wanted to do this yesterday. What were you thinking? How could you not have included that to begin with? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And like, whoa, okay, no problem. We'll get that done. And this is definitely a top secret. This is definitely a top secret thing about beta testing in Israel, or how to run your beta testing. So don't give away the secret. It's between you and me. But I call it the no bullshit approach. And that's one of the things that's amazing about Israel. One of the quick differences that I discovered when running these beta tests, meeting users. And so my advice to you when you're trying to figure stuff out at the beginning is definitely do your beta testing in Israel, because we like to challenge norms, or as I prefer to call it, no bullshit. So that was story number one. Story number 2 is about building credibility. In the competitive startup landscape, gaining social proof and validation, especially from established brands, is really crucial. And this really underscores the importance of credibility through endorsements, through partnerships, testimonials, especially from well-known brands. And for marketers, this means focusing on building that trust and creating the authority in the market, which can significantly boost your brand reputation and attract more customers. Of course, testimonials are always good, and testimonials directly from customers, like I talked about in the last story, are very important. But how do you build credibility? And so this story takes us to early 2019. I just joined my interview a couple months in. We'd planned our first event and London. I participated in a big HR tech event. My interview is a video interviewing company, so recorded one-way video interviews, typical B2B SaaS model. And we really wanted to draw up business. We decided to focus first on the UK because it's a lot closer to Israel, but it's an English-speaking market. It's a bit smaller, and it's a bit smaller than the US, and thus a bit more manageable. Costs are a bit lower. So we go out to our first conference. We have a great time. We shake a lot of hands. A few of those people stood out. Came home, got on my email, started to follow up, but like an Israeli follow-up, I was persistent. I was on them. I was emailing them. I was even calling them. And boom, I get an invitation to go to Dover. And Dover's like, the corner of England. It's not exactly London, right? But I said, okay, low budgets and everything. I convinced the CEO. I said, gotta go. So I get on the plane and I go down to Dover in the very corner of England. And I take a hotel for the night. I wake up in the morning and I go to meet Taz. And Taz is my perfect client. He's excited about technology. He's definitely prone to be an early adapter. He's got enough authority in the organization, but what's making the difference is the personal touch. I mean, I flew all the way from Israel just to meet with him for like an hour and a half in Dover. And guess what? We got the deal. And why did we get the deal? Because of the personal touch. But why was the deal so important? Because brand matters. Because Taz worked for P&O Ferries. And P&O Ferries is a household name in England. Everybody knows P&O Ferries. They run the ferry from Dover to Calais, among other things. They're a big company, and brand matters. And just like that, we got our first enterprise logo on the wall. Now, logos, we're familiar with them. We see them all the time. They carry a lot of weight, the ones that are familiar. As a small startup, you always want that endorsement from a large enterprise, from a well-known brand. So how can a small startup compete? Well, you start by associating, by creating some social proof that then builds credibility. And that credibility is worth mountains. And the personal connections are what make that happen. So how do you create a trusted brand? You make the personal connections, you double down on the potential clients, and you go the extra mile. So that's story number 2. Story number 3 is about global vision. So Israeli startups often aim for global markets right from their inception, understanding the importance of the kind of worldwide perspective. And for marketers, having a global vision involves recognizing and adapting to diverse cultures and markets, creating campaigns that resonate on an international scale, and also leveraging global trends to build a strong, kind of more universal brand presence. And so an interesting thing, one of the things that I participate in and have been for over 6.5 years now is is as an expert in an accelerator called Mass Challenge. And Mass Challenge started in Boston, arrived in Israel over 6 years ago. And Mass Challenge Israel is a startup accelerator that helps startups go global. And so through Mass Challenge, I've been mentoring a company from San Diego for the last few months already. And this is an ongoing trend. Every year I get new startups. A lot of them are based in Israel, but occasionally they're based somewhere else. And so I'll ask you the question: what's a startup from San Diego? Shout out to all the Southern California people for tuning into us. I know Mirage is also Southern California based, so not too far from you guys. What is a startup from San Diego doing in a Jerusalem, Israel-based accelerator? But there's something unique in the sauce here. There's something a bit different about the way we do things in Israel. And big shout out to Mass Challenge, by the way. And so my theory about one of the elements of our secret sauce is a story that goes back to our roots. So back all the way to the Bible, really. The Talmud, which is the central text of rabbinic Judaism, and also the primary source of Jewish religious law called halakha, and also Jewish theology. So the Talmud's an ancient text, and what I want to tell you about here is a passage where the Talmud is actually interpreting a passage that originates in Psalms that says, "Mikol melamdai hiskalti." I have learned much from my teachers. And this is a text that I learned as a young man, and it's really stuck with me throughout my career. Because what the Talmud, the direction the Talmud takes that sentence, that I've learned much from my teachers, is Mikol melamdai hiskalti umitalmidai yoter mikulam. I have learned much from my teachers. I have learned more from my colleagues than my teachers, and I have learned more from my students than from all of them. And this is a really cool concept. As I said, something that's always stuck in the back of my mind, stuck with me throughout my entire career. Anyone who has what to contribute and is willing to give of themselves to others can be a mentor. It's even easy to be a mentor sometimes. And the accelerators, such as Mass Challenge and other organizations that help form a structure, also provide a critical service in vetting and matching and facilitating these relationships. These programs bring together mentors and mentees. And some of the programs are global and some are inherently local, and some have been around for a while and some are limited. But in all the cases, they provide a critical service. And that service is the backbone of what we call the ecosystem. And that's the secret sauce, I think. Like, deep in our heritage is this idea that you're always learning. And not only from the experts, but you're learning by participating in the ecosystem. So thank you to the startups from San Diego, all the way from San Diego to Jerusalem, for always learning and always teaching us so well. I can say with full confidence that one of the things that as a marketer is crucial is constantly be learning. I think as people in general, to constantly be learning. But I highly encourage you to seek out those opportunities as well to not only to learn from others, but to engage in that sort of mentoring or teaching capacity. Because at the end of the day, the feedback that you get from your students, the feedback that you get in all of your interactions are absolutely invaluable. And they're one of the things that keep us fresh and keep us going and keep us with new ideas constantly. And I really like the idea that goes all the way back to our roots, comes right from the Bible, right from the ancient Jewish scholarly texts, and is something that we can feel today. It's one of the coolest connections between kind of our ancient history and our modern startup nation, world. So about the sea pandas, you remember we talked about that? So we talked about marketing as a lens and finding that aha moment, the one where you catch the other person's attention and allow them to, for a second, notice what you're doing. And I think that that's a really important basis to recognize about marketing in general, and one of the reasons that I find the challenge marketing so fun. We talked about challenging norms, or as I said, no bullshit, or do your beta testing in Israel if you like. Building credibility. Brand matters, even if it takes you all the way to the far corners of England, to the far corners of the earth. Personal connections make a huge difference. And that's one of the things that helps you build your credibility, hook on to more established brands. And those brands really do matter. Your brand matters and their brand matters. Having a global vision. And if you notice what I did there, we tied the global vision into this idea, this ancient idea of unique thinking, of how there's a reciprocity in the way in which we learn and the way in which we grow and develop. And I think that that's a pretty universal lesson to be taught. But certainly in my experience in marketing and being an active member of the ecosystem of the startup nation, I think that's something that that's really interesting and unique, and something that I'm always very proud of, the connection between our roots and our future. And I want to ask you for a second, what have you learned today? What stuck with you? And just kind of to start to wrap up, one of the key lessons that I always share with startups is to take a page out of that Startup Nation book. What I mean in a broader sense is to adopt some of the mentality that's helped Israel become the startup nation. So one of those key elements that we talked about today is a vibrant ecosystem of individuals and companies and investors. I encourage you to seek consultancy and mentorship wherever it comes from. That's giving and taking, by the way. Becoming the mentor yourself and also seeking out mentorship. Encourage and even lobby your government, your business sector to invest in the entrepreneurs and emerging technologies, especially in areas where you might have an expertise or an unfair advantage. And sometimes a truly local advisor will be key to understanding the market, but often, and especially if your aims are global, reaching out and taking advantage of the global ecosystem is also highly recommended. So with that, I'll thank you for listening and for participating a little bit today as well to the live audience. Thanks for being with us. I'm Eliav. Great to get to know you, and thanks again to Mirage for having me.
Eliav, thank you so much. Highly appreciate you taking the time today to enlighten our Mirage tribe. Let's open up for Q&A. Anyone have questions to ask Eliav?
Hey, Eliav, thanks for your presentation. I really like that beginning with the focus lens, how you position it to how marketing relates to your stories. I don't have a question, but I do have a remark that your slides and your flow of the presentation is a great testimony of how great of a marketer you are. It was really well done, so good job.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Do we have any questions for Eliav?
I can tell you I'm full of stories, so feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to share more. But yeah, I'm glad that I'm glad that this kind of sparked a little bit of thinking, and definitely takes takes some time to process those lessons.
Absolutely. So last chance before we close. Well, on that note, Eliav, thank you again on behalf of Paul Mirage and the Mirage Institute for taking the time today. Thank you everyone for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you in the upcoming weeks. We've got a great series ahead of us that Ellie has put together, so I hope to see all your faces next week. Thank you.
Bye. Take care. Thanks.